There's nothing quite like the demise of a U.S. allied dictator to get elite media talking about the clash between U.S. ideals and reality. Thus, the August 22nd headline in the New York Times, "Ethiopian Leader's Death Highlights Gap Between U.S. Interests and Ideals." Ethiopian Prime Minister Meles Zenawi was, in Jeffrey Gettleman's words, notoriously repressive, and much more. Quote, "Despite being one of the United States' closest allies on the continent, Mr. Meles repeatedly jailed dissidents and journalists, intimidated opponents and their supporters to win mind-bogglingly one-sided elections, and oversaw brutal campaigns in restive areas of the country where the Ethiopian military has raped and killed many civilians." Close quote. That first word of that passage, despite, is a signal that we are supposed to see this record as incompatible with our own strong values. Gettleman admits later that Ethiopia is hardly alone in raising difficult questions on how the United States should balance interests and principles. He then cites U.S. support for Saudi Arabia and an array of one-party rulers across Africa, all of this, quote, "despite a commitment to promoting democracy," close quote. Well, that's a strange level of commitment. Of course, there's a long list of tyrants, dictators, and human rights abusers the United States has supported, from Suharto in Indonesia to Mubarak in Egypt, for a time Saddam Hussein. Reagan-era policies in Latin America supported strongmen and fielded armies to overthrow governments the U.S. didn't care for. Most people with a passing knowledge of this history recognize that there are too many exceptions to this rule about American ideals to make it a rule at all. So every now and then an article like this one appears, expressing some puzzlement over the gap between what the United States practices and what it preaches. An effective propaganda system requires these small openings.